So I am so excited today to have my friend and colleague Molly Sargent with me. Molly and I go back, I think it's something like 25 years, where together we were contractors for a company named the Barron Group, which is a sales training firm out of Westport, Connecticut. And Molly is one of the most talented people I know. And I would also say one of the most fun people I know. And it has been on Molly's agenda for a long time to write a book. And I was so excited in December when I got a text from her asking for my address because she had just come out with this fabulous book called Sane Response. So,
Mhm.
as many of you know, I'm currently in the middle of a campaign called 30 Days to Mel, where my attempt is to inspire women entrepreneurs to set really big goals and to go after them. And so I decided to practice what I preached and decided to create a goal for myself, which is to be on the Mel Robbins podcast. And I have been documenting this journey every day since January 1st, and I plan to do that for 30 days. So if you're not following along, please do. You'll find the Instagram handle below. But right now, I am just so thrilled to introduce my friend Molly. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you so much, Nadine, and thank you for reaching out to me, and thank you for making a big deal out of having get a book written because it's so funny. It really is a big deal in that it feels like an enormous amount of closure, and I didn't even expect the level of satisfaction that I would feel that I actually do. So, yeah, thanks
That
for
is,
making a
and you should. It is a huge accomplishment.
big deal.
So one of the things I'm most interested in talking to you about is, and by the way, it is such a beautiful book. I mean, it is you were such a talented writer. So I'm so glad that it's out and for the world to see and for you to share that talent. And one of the things that I'm really interested in talking to you about today is I know it had been a goal for you for a long time to write a book for many years. And so what I'm curious about is why this year? What made it actually happen?
That's a funny That's a funny question because actually when you say that, what comes to mind for me is when I turned 18, I started to cry because I wasn't yet published. And now I'm 62 and I'm just published. It took just a smidge o' time for me to get to where I really wanted to go. I
Hey, listen,
have
it's you're there. You're
I'm
there.
there, I'm there. I finally got there. I have had books and books and books and books on my mind. And I will tell you, back in the 90s, I remember having a fabulous book title and I thought, oh, there are people who know more than I do on this. I can't possibly be the person who has a point of view. And I remember looking back about 10 years later going, oh no, I had a unique point of view. At the time, I was working in a human resources development company out of Pittsburgh called Development Dimensions International. And I had the privilege of being at the table with people from McKinsey and Bain Consulting and other places. And they would say things and they'd say, of course, we don't know how to do XYZ in terms of bringing that through line to people and helping that aspirations of a company actually become behavioral. And I thought, I do. I know how to do that. And I kept thinking to myself, I should write this book, but I just didn't know that I was the author. I refused to allow that I knew enough. I think it was the day that one of our presidents finally was younger than I was. I was like, oh, maybe this is the time I stop looking around for other people in the room who are more knowledgeable in all the world. Like I'm it. I'm the elder statesperson now. Maybe it's time. So I got really clear. Part of it was getting super clear on what I wanted to say, and those who know me know I have very much to say. But being able to distill a through line that is of service on the planet was probably one of the most important things that I could do. And the fact of the matter is that process actually helped me come up with about 7 titles. And so I'm excited because each title seems to follow on and complement the other, which is exciting. but it still had to come down to the moment of writing. Go ahead.
So let me ask you this, Molly. What it sounded to me like this was actually a goal that you set for this year for
Yeah.
2023.
Yes. In particular, that is true because I set out during when we were all on our couches or sheltering in place, as it were. I had the opportunity to really be thinking about how do I bring forward my knowledge in a way that's distilled? And partly that's a business decision because not only does it give you credibility, not only does it put you up in a place where it would be easy for people to understand what you do, why you do it, how you're differentiated in the world. So that was one benefit. The other was I could stop customizing everything I did for every other person, every client being different, being able to have one book that said it all. And instead of needing to customize something, I could send it out to a client. So I finally got to the point somewhere in the middle of my COVID experience of saying, I'm going to get a book written. And the beginning of this year of 2023, I should say, I said, I'm not going to leave this year without a book in print.
Wow.
And
And
yeah,
so, right. And so it was really in January that you decided to do that. Was it part of a process of saying, here are my goals for the year, or
yeah.
less formal?
Oh, I am very, very, very much into distilling and knowing what I most want. So, for instance, this year I have Brim with Love. And the reason is I've got books, revenue, income, movement, which is getting me to the gym, with because I have two weddings, both my children are going to be getting married, and love is the value that I most want to have around it. But I probably have a 15-page outline of what I most want. I won't hit them all as I didn't in 2023, but the big ones I got. And I know it's because I said to myself, you may not leave 2023 without a book in your hand. And I told everybody I knew, just like you're doing with the 30-day challenge to get to Mel. The more public I made it, the more I thought I really have to have this book done because people kept saying, well, how's that book coming along? How's that book coming along? I thought, oh gosh, I really got to get that book done. December 30th, which was a Friday, as you might recall, I went into my printer, who happened to be local, and say, I must have a copy of that book in my hot little hands. There were some glitches. We were supposed to send it out. We couldn't get it out. But I said, hand me a book. I must have a book.
I love that. Now, so it was a very clear
Yeah.
goal for you. And did you put anything in place in terms of, writing a book requires so much discipline and commitment.
Yeah.
Did you kind of let it flow, or was it more of a formal process for you?
I can speak from both experiences of let it flow and formal process because the one book I just released, the Sane Response book, was a flow book. I had the benefit of a lot of time on a couch, as we all did. So a lot more, and that was a book of poetry about my arc through divorce and discovery. So that was much more semi-autobiographical. The one that I'm writing now, which I'm very excited about, and in fact, two I'm writing at the same time. Is very much about time on the calendar. It is at 5:30 in the morning. I've got it in my calendar until 7 o'clock. Get up, put the time in, spend the time actually focusing. I follow several writers. I joined a writing group with a major author. I also found some really beautiful resources that help you with the writing process, understanding the publishing, self-publishing uh, versus going with a publishing firm, if you will, so an imprint. So there was a lot to do, and I got very rigorous this year around the mechanics of publishing and distribution and promotion, as well as really getting into the massaging of the writing. The editor is one of the most important people you will ever have, the person who tells you like it is, whom you trust, who also, by the way, probably has a degree in some form of writing talent. Um, and then the other piece of this is, as I left the more creative, self-expressive book to go to the one that is more mechanically about the business that I do, I'm finding my writing process to be different. One was when it really occurred to me, when my energy lifted. This one is get up at 5:30, make sure you're there, getting the work done before the day starts putting too many demands on my time.
And so can you talk about why you chose to do the poetry book before the business book? Because knowing you for years, I had heard you talk about ideas for business books.
Mhm.
So why the poetry book first?
I like to say that this book wrote itself every time, and it's in the forward and the epilogue of, or the preface and the epilogue of the book, where I talk about the writing process a little bit, because I kept sitting down to try and write the business book, and the business book wouldn't come, the business book wouldn't come, and I went and found all of these journals. I have like tens of journals from over the years that I mined for the poetry, and I ended up with 500 pages of poetry. And it was joyful for me to do this. I love to write poetry. I love to write, but I particularly love to write poetry. And so it was super fun for me to do that. And so every time I got frustrated trying to write the business book, I found myself pivoting over to the poetry, and it was more a release than it was an obligation. And because I was having so much fun, I would spend 10 hours some days on poetry and look up, and the sun had gone down. I hadn't eaten dinner, and I had been doing head down work on poetry all day long. So that was a unique experience of our particular.
Really in the
Yeah.
flow. And are
Yes.
you having fun now writing the business book?
I'm having a great deal of fun. It's almost like the twin that had to come out first.
Right.
Like, you can't birth the second twin. You gotta birth one and then the other. So the newer book, and it's called, I crack up every time I say it. If I tell you what I really think, can we still work together? And it's the book that has to do with the kind of work I do inside, and you do as well, inside Fortune 10 financial services and professional services firms, helping them to better understand and unpack the dynamics of a conversation, and how they can go off the rails. And it's give feedback, get feedback, guide feedback, stay off the drama triangle. How can you be in intense and innovative conversations with differences of opinion, corralling everybody's best voices, and having the productive clashes without the breakdowns. So that's what that book is really focused on. And in that case, it's almost it's fun in a different way, because it's not so exploratory or writing to discover as it is. I've said this 1,000 times. Let me finally get it distilled to its most salient points and its most pithy representation. So it's engaging for a reader. It can create some action out of it. So it's a whole different vocabulary and writing style that needs to be applied here. And I'm having just as much fun.
Terrific, great. And so what I'm hearing from you in terms of particularly the poetry book, which is out now,
Mhm.
or it's coming out, I guess, but it's done. It's
Yeah,
done,
yeah.
ready,
Well,
ready
pre-order
for
pre-orders are
distribution.
beginning next week, and we're and I will plug this. The pre-order strategy, we're giving profits to women empowering women kinds of organizations, one of which is called Women Empowering Women, a not-for-profit out of New Canaan, Connecticut, and some other organizations like the Hendricks Institute will make contributions there, all to support people getting the kinds of skills and access to support, especially women getting support in finding their through line. I started mollysargent.com, part of my business, as a way. I say it's women moving forward in work, love, and life. And I want to support through this book and the profits of this book ways for women to get the kind of support that they need. So yeah.
That's terrific. That's terrific. So when I think about, because if I'm deconstructing kind of when you have a goal and
Hmm.
actually achieving the goal and what
Yes.
goes on in the middle, what I
Yes.
heard you say is that number one, you told as many people as you could, right? So you almost that created a sense of accountability for you.
Correct.
It felt right. This was a flow state for you. So
Yes.
doing the work on it felt like you were absolutely meant to be doing it, it sounds like.
Yes.
And what else would you say for women who are listening who may be, wanting to go after a big, bold goal? We're calling it, make an exponential leap in your business, a MEL, which is the
Hmm.
pun of Mel Robbins.
Mhm.
So for women who want to do that, but a book seems like so big, or it may be being on a podcast, or it might be speaking, creating a signature speech and trying to get on the speaking circuit.
Yeah.
What would your advice be to them? People who either have a goal. Why don't we start with them, and then we'll talk about women who they may be a little bit hesitant to set the goal. So
Gotcha.
why don't we start with, for women who have a really big, bold goal, what would your advice be for them?
I love this question, and here's why. To me, it's a little like you declared to yourself, "I'm going to climb Mount Everest." And so you do all the things that you're talking about process-wise. You're going to start here, and you're gonna think about the kind of backpack and the Sherpas you might, engage, along the pathway, and you're gonna put the right things in your backpack to make sure that you're ready. I think the most important thing to remember is that halfway up the mountain, there is going to be a snowstorm, and it's gonna be a doozy. And that's not the moment to start questioning, "I never should have started climbing up the mountain." Instead, what you need to be saying, and I often said to myself, "Oh, here's that snowstorm I always knew was going to be coming. And good for me, I have Sherpas who know the way. I have things in my backpack that are going to support me through this moment when things get a little bit tough or really, really tough." Don't doubt the goal that you set. Don't second guess yourself. Maybe go and nuance it a little bit. Maybe there's a different peak, somewhere along the line that you have to get to first before you can get to the second peak. Don't doubt the overall intention to do the thing, the goal that you most wanted. Anticipate and then trust yourself that you're scrappy enough. You've got it. You're going to make this work because you can. And and because you really don't have an option. I mean, what's the option? Truly. And then you'll just feel so disappointed. So take the feedback, but be ready for the storms and then don't second guess yourself. Just hunker down and get through them because you really still want to get to the top of that mountain.
Great advice. Great advice. And so how about a woman who is almost too afraid to set the goal? And we have found this a lot. So we've interviewed over 100 women entrepreneurs, and there's real goal resistance out there. And my hypothesis on why that is because if you don't set the goal, you're not going to miss the target. And missing the target feels kind of like losing, and
Mhm.
nobody wants to lose. So,
Mm.
what would your advice be to women who want, have kind of this idea in the back of their head and they want to do it, but they haven't even given voice to it yet?
Yeah. Um, Uh, well, 2 things. One is I've written 2 poems about that, and they're in the books, because I do speak to that, a little bit ironically. I mean, I did not intend to, but that was my experience, both in not just in work, but in love and life. There is that hesitancy to really call what you want and then to lean in and decide, "No, this is it." And I think there's a period of time when you have to neurologically line up with what you want. Your head knows, but your body hasn't caught up, or your body knows, but your head hasn't caught up. Sometimes it's the opposite. You know what you want, you can feel it, it's calling you forward, but you are so socialized in your storytelling about how you can't, you shouldn't.
Mm.
There's a beautiful body of work done by the Hendricks Institute. I love these people. Hearts in Harmony is a great website where a lot of free resources. But Gay Hendricks wrote a beautiful book called The Big Leap, and I highly recommend to anyone worried about how to set an intention and really go after it, start with The Big Leap, because in it he talks about a concept that I have seen 1,000 times with executives, men, women, all over. It's called the ULP, the upper limit problem. And what he says, he's a Stanford psychologist, and his wife is I believe, a PhD in Gestalt therapy or body-centered wisdom. I call it eat, pray, pay the mortgage. They bring their wisdom together in very practical ways. But this ULP concept, he says, is partly a problem of people having wonderful ideas of what they want, but they're not neurologically lined up to be okay with it. And that's a fascinating thing to me. And when I started truly grokking what that meant, how my body felt uncomfortable in the
Mm.
rarefied air of my own success. My body just kept shutting down, even though my head said, of course, this is what we want. Or my body was saying it's what we want, but my head would tell me I couldn't. Getting that alignment between what I want and how to actually feel into it so that I felt the sense of commitment, entitlement, non-apology. That was the work of quite a bit of time. I highly recommend you go there. Get visceral. Find the place where it resides and find the limiting beliefs that somehow are running the show and you don't even know that they're there. Go find those and unpack those, because that's what's getting in the way.
Awesome. So we'll make sure and link the book below. And
Yeah.
by the way, for listeners, we're just launching this YouTube channel. And if you could subscribe and ring the bell, we'll be bringing quite a bit of content to help women entrepreneurs succeed. So, Molly, I would love, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but could you read a verse from
Oh,
your book?
thank you.
And also, this might be too big of an ask, but
No.
how about you said that there were a couple that were along this theme in here? Perhaps you could
Yeah.
choose one of those.
Well, yes. And so just to give you a little bit of an overview, the book is in 5 chapters. One is, and it is my journey through divorce to discovery, but I want to be very clear. This is not a book about divorce. It's a book about anything disruptive or uncomfortable that draws you to a position that I call I call it watermelon on the head moment. And I think you and I have talked about that, Nadine. The reason I call it this, it's the moment in time when I think things get so bad or so out of alignment with yourself, and I know for me it was the case, that I finally thought, if someone tells me to wear a watermelon on my head, that that would make a difference, I'd be asking them the question, where do I find a watermelon? So I think you've got to look for the thing that makes you uncomfortable and decide, is it because, again, back to this body-centered knowing, is it because it really is scary and dangerous, don't go there, or is it simply because it's uncomfortable? And if you could let yourself sit in the uncomfortableness long enough and break through, then all of a sudden, in the words of Katie Hendricks, you actually completely rewire your neurology to allow you to be comfortable in a more expanded version of yourself. So that's a lot of what I invite people to really think about as they not only go through perhaps my book, but their own experience of what they're trying to achieve. I'll do two of them. One is called I'm Angry at My Ugly. And I want this to speak to the women who actually see themselves in a way that is so programmed, and to recognize that the programming is not the reality. It's just the one that we were rutted with so often that we believe it. And when we break the bonds of that socialized thinking about ourselves, when we break those bonds, we are free to do very daring things. But it takes the courage first to break the mindset and then the neurological lineup with that mindset to get us to a place where we can finally be expressive. And so there are several in here to that topic, but I'm going to go to the one called, it's a short poem to start with, but secondly, it speaks to just a little bit the where we perhaps begin when we are uncomfortable with calling ourselves forward to the thing we most want. And again, there are several of them, and this is just one, and I hope it's of service. Okay. It's called I'm Angry at My Ugly. I dedicate this for so many of us girls. My knotness has me tied up in knots. This will surprise no one who knows one like me. I'm angry at my ugly. We grew up learning what beauty is, what's good. Was it not universally understood, well advertised, and doubly advised by parents, partners, pundits, and peers? They all seem to make it perfectly clear. You've simply got to have what they've got. The pretty, the wealthy, the skinny, the healthy, the famous, the few. If that's not you, well then, you're ugly. Who told me this? No doubt smugly. Who am I? Who was I to believe it? Just leave it, you tell me. I tell me that too. Easy to say, harder to do.
Oh, Molly, wow. That is beautiful, and it just is so relatable, I think.
I'm really glad.
It is so relatable to so many women. That was just beautiful.
I'm really, really glad. So, the second one, because I want to leave you on a more uplifted version of what we're up to here. Let me go grab that one. Um, it's been I heard from someone to whom I had sent a pre-order of this book, and she wrote today and she said, and she's a young woman and she had gone through a divorce, as it turns out, but she said, I sat down to read one or two, but I read the whole book and I cried and I laughed, and it's on my bedside table and it will be for a very long time to come, because it keeps speaking to me, and I can see where this arc is not just about a divorce. It's about everything that I want to bring up in myself, to bring myself to where I know I need to be, not where everyone has told me I need to be. And that made my day.
Oh
That
my
made my week.
God,
It
of
probably made
course.
my year.
Of course it would.
Yeah. So this one is it's in this section. So there are 5 sections: unknowing, unwilling, unwinding, understanding, and unbound. And I noticed as I wrote them and started to catalog them, I I found it was very resonant and reflective of the stages of grief through Kubler-Ross, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, if you happen to know her work. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting that that self-authored into this. I mean, honestly, I looked down one day and went, oh, look at that. So it feels very resonant. It feels very flowy, as you say, the way that this book arrived. The next one's also flowy, but in a very different way. But this poem I particularly like because it's out of the toward the back. The front is really about I'm stuck. Toward the 3, unwinding, which is where this next poem is from, is when I start to notice myself opening up more and more and more. And you'll also notice it's kind of fun. One of my graphic designers who worked on the book, she's a fabulous young woman. She came up with the idea of these blossoms. So we start as a bud, and
Nice.
throughout the chapters that the blossoms are growing, which I really love. I think that's beautiful.
Mm.
So this one is called Bird, comma. Bird, you are so very terribly red, chest puffed into the rising sun. Your magnificence, not pride, but nor do you hide, is simply shared from your perch up there in the tall pine. Such is my observance of you from my own perch. Mine sits past the green trees and the brown house where I sip tea. I'm so grateful for your bold display. I think I'll wear red today.
Love that. Love that. Yes, I had read interesting. I haven't read all the poems in the book, but the two that you selected, I had read. So
Mm,
what a wonderful, wonderful job. And I would imagine that, your friend who's putting this on her nightstand,
mm,
it's the kind of poetry that is going to mean different things to you at different stages
mm,
of your life, or if you've had a good day or a bad day. So
mhm.
it's such a great accomplishment, Molly, and I congratulate you so much on this, and we're going to make sure and link where people can get the book.
Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. I love the work you're bringing forward. I love the courage of it. One other thing you said is something to offer to people associated with and these women. Um, One of the things I love that you're doing, and I think it's about that goal setting, is you set the goal, but you remain somewhat unattached. It's not that you're not committed. It's that you're not hanging your sense of who you are or even your purpose entirely on the completion in the way that you perhaps dream of it to be. And what I love about that, and I have found this for myself very often, there are times when I'll put a goal out there and I find that I'm up the pathway and I'm suddenly at a place where I have a different view than when I started. And the different view made me realize that the goal was a beacon. It was not the destination, but it called me forward to get me to a place where I could see something differently and pivot and go, oh, I couldn't see from my last vantage point. So I went toward this goal, but now I'm going to take the take the advice of my own knowing that that was a beautiful beacon, not goal, because now I can look and the destination appears to be calling me differently. And that's the thing that I also would say to people who are afraid of goals: to hold them lightly. I wrote a poem about that. Um, hold them lightly. Hold everything lightly, not a lack of commitment, kind of like a baby. You want to hold that baby in a way that is both loving and allowing that it's growing and changing, and not so clutched that you suffocate it, and not so controlling that you don't allow the expression of its growth, or that child's growth, to be what it wants to be. Your idea is an infant in your arms and wants to grow up to be a teenager and then an adult, and you got to give them room to move. So, boy, I'm using a lot of women.
Yeah.
Well, what the heck? Um,
So yes, I think that that is at the core of goal resistance, and why so many women that we talk to, and women in even in our program, have been resistant to set goals. But we know from research that if you set those, that there's a lot that comes from the experience of setting a goal, right? And especially if we reach higher. But I
mhm,
think as women, so many of us are perfectionists, much more so than men.
mhm.
And the idea of, oh my God, what if I don't make it?
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right. Detachment is important here,
Mhm.
in terms of putting it out there, because the real power is
Ye-
in the pursuit of the goal.
Yes.
It's actually not the goal itself. It's the transformation that is happening in pursuit of that goal. And as you said, having the flexibility to allow or to readjust as necessary. But goal setting is a part of it's really a business practice. And so, I would like women to be more open to it, and see that it really is about the journey,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
that you miss, 100% of the shots that you don't take,
Mhm.
right? We will grow faster if we set ambitious goals, no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. There are so many quotes about this. There is that delicate balance I think you're bringing forward in even the demonstration through your 30-day to mail campaign. The idea of the audaciousness, the idea of make it really big, make it playful too. By the way, give it a name. Everyone loves a name on something, and as soon as you name a campaign or you name something, people join the play with you. And then, as we were just discussing, allow for it to morph a bit and keep your curiosity up. Also, share it with people, and it's wonderful to share it broadly. Know the core group of people whom you can trust to reflect supportively, and not in some way that's castigating, not in some way that makes you wrong if you don't get it exactly the way you put it out there. They've they're playing a different game than you're playing. That next book, if I tell you what I really think, is all about what game are we playing? Because sometimes you're out there trying to play with people, and you say, "Hey, let's all get together and we'll talk about my goal setting or what have you," and you're going to play a game, and half of you show up with volleyballs and the other half show up with hockey sticks, and you're thinking, well, someone's going to get hurt. So be sure that you know the people with whom you're sharing your best ideas, and you can share it as broadly as you want. But when it comes time to take advice, suss the source of advice. Name you're the CEO, name your board of directors and assign them really carefully. Are they playing the same curiosity bound game, or are they more rigid and demanding of
Well,
perfectionism?
in fact, they're on Mel's podcast. Mel talks about this, that there's new research from, I think it's Ohio State,
Hmm.
Fairly recent research. There's been research for a long time saying that it's very powerful when you share your goal.
Right.
This research, however, says exactly what you're saying. Be careful. It depends, or I shouldn't say be careful. It depends on who you share your goal with. And it showed that when you share it with or a mentor or someone who you respect,
Hmm.
your chances of meeting that goal are that much greater than certainly not sharing it at all. But there is some risk, right? And I think, I understand why some women wouldn't want to go as public as I have with this goal. And the reason why I did that is to inspire other women to go after goals like this. But there are some goals that I have that I certainly are not, I'm not sharing publicly, right? But
Yeah.
I am bringing my tight circle in, and who I know is going to be supportive, to support me in the pursuit of the goal.
Hmm. On this goal setting and the circle of people with whom you share it, I've had several goals that I've gotten talked out of over the years to my
Yes,
great detriment.
yes,
And and it and in truth, what I so for I found the perfect house with a southern exposure overlooking Long Island Sound, bermed up on a hill above the didn't even need flood insurance. And I walked away. And here's what I have to say about that. I found it was off market. I invited a whole bunch of people, and what I actually did is I outsourced my fear to their vocal cords, and I let them be the voice of the very thing I was most afraid of.
right.
And I in retrospect, it's been an extremely valuable lesson, painful, but extremely valuable lesson because I walked away from the house and I could have had it. And everyone was like, "You're going to be underwater." Well, it's never flooded, and oh, by
Right.
the way, yeah,
Yeah.
etc. Anyway, what I did was I took my own fear and I gave it to other people to express back to me just to reinforce it. So
And
by contrast, now I'm really careful when I have an idea, especially one that I truly want to see come forward, to find the people I know who are considered, who have my best interests really, really at heart, and who
mm,
don't have agendas of their own hidden behind their actions or their advice. And there are times when people don't, they're not mean, they're not mean spirited. It's not that they're not friends. It's not that they don't have your back. It's that they don't even know what's running their own programming.
of
And
course.
so they speak from these limiting beliefs of their own that might sublimate the level of your extraordinariness because it just makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah,
So
we have a client who is an attorney, and she wanted to be a coach many, many years ago,
mm,
and her friends and family talked her out of it.
there you
And
go.
she regrets that. But it's interesting your perspective on, is part of that we are allowing them
Yeah.
to talk us out of it because we're looking for that excuse.
There's a body of work and I really love it and espouse it significantly that everyone shows up in our lives in a way that in some way is very intentionally here for us. So when I get somebody who is voicing, well, my daughter one time said to me, it was high school, she was bored at her high school and it was a private school and I was spending a lot of money on it. I was like, honey, if you're not happy, then you go and tell me what it is that you want to do. And so she comes back about a week later. I've gone off on a business trip. I come back. She's like, guess what? I got invited to a high school and it's in Switzerland. I'm like, uh-oh. And I went, oh. And my first thought was, you can't do that because we're not the Rockefellers. Well, I also had just come from California where I'd been working in a consciousness and mindfulness group where they said, uprising energy, get out of its way. Don't question how it's going to come through. Get curious. Don't sublimate it. Like get curious about where's this leading me? What does it want? And I've learned to live on that plane a
Mm.
little bit more than a lot of people would think logically is a good idea. But I will tell you the number of times where I just felt uprising energy. I have a friend who literally lives her life as that rises or defeats my energy, rises or defeats my energy. So my daughter goes off, and sure enough, don't we figure out when we call this school in Switzerland, where she ultimately went, that yes, indeed, there's a way for us to get there. And by the way, it's less expensive for me to send her there than to keep her in the United States.
Wow.
Who knew? But here was the
Mhm.
funny thing. since we're talking about my book on divorce, my husband, I call him my beautiful husband, my used to be husband, my beautiful husband, I allowed him to be the voice of my angst. And I called him and said, "This is what's happening." What's the first thing he said? "We're not the Rockefellers." And I had to laugh at myself because I recognized the language and I went, "Oh, that's my voice. That's my voice." And I knew it right away. And I said, "No, that's the voice I already told. I'm going to get curious and not contracted in this moment. I'm going to allow and explore until I absolutely have all the data, and then I can make a decision." But it was funny for me to have made the commitment to listen how other people's voices are actually my own voice, outsourced to them so that I don't have to take responsibility for it. And as soon as I found it, I went, "Oh, no, 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 no. He may say that, but I don't have to believe it. I get to let him have that opinion, but not absorb it and make it my own." And sure enough, we pursued it, and miracle upon miracle, all of a sudden, she's in Switzerland going to this fabulous school and loving every minute.
Wow. Wow. It's amazing to think that, how many goals have been smothered, and how much progress we all could make if we listen to our gut on it, if we were curious about it, and if we didn't allow fear and fear and imposter syndrome, which you talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
Get in our way.
Yeah, and the entire poem called "I Know You Feel Afraid" is about exactly this idea of needing to it's okay to be afraid. A fear is a bit of information. It's what you do with a fear and how you process that fear and how it directs your actions and your mindset going forward. So and that poem is very behavioral because that's a lot of the work you and I both do is we like to distill all of these great concepts to what does it look like at Tuesday at 2 o'clock when a meeting is breaking down or a child is breaking down. So that's a poem that speaks to this very topic. When you just said that, Nadine, I actually felt shuddered, like a shudder go through my body. The number of dreams and aspirations and goals that have been smothered. Like that just feels incredibly visceral for me
Mhm.
of, yeah, I think we're standing on the shoulders of many, many women who got us this far. And I think our time, we've received the baton. Let's run with it. Let's
Yes.
boldly run with it. This book is dedicated to my mother. And my mother should have been running a small country and definitely been a CEO of a small company but instead, and you'll find a little bit out about this and about me, she died at 59 of alcoholism. And I swear to you, it's because she was stuck in a cul-de-sac, didn't have the job opportunities, didn't have the education opportunities, had 6 children, love my siblings, we're fabulous family. But I think her lack of ability to really be expressed is part of the motivation I have for doing what I do today and for writing the books I'm writing, especially this one in particular. There are days when I think I'm waking up for both of us and I'm going, "Yep, we're gonna do it differently than you had the opportunity to do with it."
Wow.
Um, so yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing, Molly. And I think you're absolutely right, is that, women, it's our time. And that's why I'm on such a mission to support women and women entrepreneurship. So Molly, tell us about the timeline on the book. I'm lucky enough to have my first copy here, but when's it coming out and how can people get it?
So the timeline for this is officially April 2nd, 2024. And we are going to be doing that in Darien, Connecticut. The details will become available very, very soon. And we'll make it a hybrid event. But if you happen to be local or in New York or in the Connecticut area, please feel free to attend. We'd love to have you. Otherwise, if you want to call in, we're going to be doing it so that people can be on Zoom and listen to the conversations and also to some poetry reading if you're so inclined. And thank you for asking.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I will definitely participate. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be in the area then, but I will be participating virtually. Well, this was a terrific conversation, Molly. Thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck on your book, Sane Response. We're going to put links in here. What a fabulous gift this would be, I was thinking, for, when someone is going through a divorce or some other kind of transition, or maybe they've lost a loved one and you don't know what to do. This would be, I think, a great, great gift. So thank you for putting this out in the world.
I'm so grateful for the opportunity to talk with you, and thanks everyone for listening.
And I'd also like to ask our listeners, if you haven't subscribed, please do. And also follow hashtag 30 days to Mel on Instagram. We need all the support we can get.